Hey, thank you so much for being here for a special Zoom and podcast simulcast. It's Zoom into Books with our friends from Headline Books and also the Big Time Talker podcast, heard on all your favorite podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, and many more. Subscribe and download today. New episodes delivered every Tuesday morning right into your mobile device. We love to talk to authors. We love to talk to subject matter leaders. And it's all made possible by our friends at speakermatch.com. They are the world's largest online virtual speakers bureau. So if you're a speaker, a platform speaker, or maybe you're a meeting planner for your local service organization, you can find one another at speakermatch.com. And thanks, Speaker Match, for making the broadcast possible. Today, we do have an International Book Awards finalist for his brand new book, Eyes of Morpheus. It's his third book. He's my friend joining us from Southern California, Kevin D. Miller, on the program. Kevin, congratulations on the brand new book and on that International Book Awards finalist. How about that?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing, and I can't tell you how thrilled I am to receive that honor, and just boom, big surprise today. So, yay!
Yay for Kevin. Hey, the last time that you and I got to spend time together in person, we had dinner in Los Angeles with a New York Times #1 best-selling author, Homer Hickam. And now you are sort of entering that rarefied air of guys that are publishing multiple books and winning lots of awards. Would a little itty bitty boy, Kevin Miller, have ever seen himself as an author?
Absolutely not. And I got to tell you, it was an honor to sit and have a dinner with you and Homer. I mean, if I can even have an inkling of his success, I will be a successful author. But no, I mean, I just never saw myself as writing books. I mean, I've always kind of been a little bit of a storyteller, and I guess so it kind of translates and stuff. But it wasn't until just a few years ago when I wrote my first book, Heart of Steel, that my father had asked me to write for him about his grandfather, about our family, that I got into writing. And once I wrote that book, I just fell in love, and I said, okay, I want to do this. I just wrote the second book, and now we've got the third one out, and I got plans for more. So,
and we see the awards hanging on some of the Eyes of Morpheus back.
Yeah, I had to put some of the awards up. Yeah, you got to have the major awards. I don't have the leg lamp or anything to put back there, but I do have the medals, so I kind of wanted to put them up there, and because I'm really, really proud of those and very happy to have received them, and very humbled by that. I mean, WHITE Skies Black Mingo won a lot of awards, and each time it happened, it's humbling thinking, wow, somebody really out there really, loves the story and got engaged in it, and they got it, they get what I was trying to say.
Let me ask you, because when we talk to authors, generally there are one of two paths. You took the second one. Either they're writers as little kids, Homer Hickam talked about writing his hometown little newspaper, the Colwood News, which he wrote a big story. I think he was in the 4th grade, about a woman who was doing her wash in the local creek, and she fell into the creek and got all wet, and she was very embarrassed and had to come back. And he wrote that up in his little newspaper that he published himself. And then, well, that story was about his mom. And so she pretty immediately took away his journalism rights. And that was the end of that. So you're either born into it like Homer, or like you come into it later in life. So what did you do to put food on the table before you were a writer?
Well, before I was a writer, I always tell my girls, it's like I feel like I've lived so many lives. People talk about past lives, but I think, a lot of us, when you get to be my age, you look back and think, I've lived, multiple lives. I've been, I'm a veteran. I spent 8 years in the United States Air Force as an electronic technician, maintaining ground navigation equipment that helps the aircraft find, where they're going.
I appreciate your service. Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I received a bachelor's of science degree in electronics technology, and I went to work for Motorola when I got out of the service, and was an engineer for Motorola for about 14 years. And then I decided, I wanted to try something new. And that's about the time that the internet came out and the web came out. And I'm kind of an artistic guy too. So the technical and the artistic side of web development pulled me in, and I went back and I got a second bachelor's degree in information technology and became a professional web developer for the city of Peoria in Arizona. Spent about 12 years there and then retired, and now I'm writing books. So
you've done a bunch of different things, but the engineering work, especially, that's very exacting work. And this is very creative. So maybe it's a little more like web designing, but what was it in you that said, I can do this? Because it's like being on a high dive before you do your first book, before you take the plunge. So what made you take that plunge? What made you think, I could do this?
I don't know. I've always liked a challenge, Burke. I mean, I've never backed down or been afraid of trying something, and I'm not afraid to fail. And I think, listening to a lot of other authors far greater and more successful than me, that's one of the things they say. Even actors. I was listening to a video of Sly Stallone, and he's talking about that. You can't be afraid to fail. You have to just kind of dive in and give it your best shot, so that at least I can say, hey, I gave it my best shot. I went to bat, and if I don't succeed, then I'll try to find another way to do it. I just refuse to not succeed at something that I really want to do and something I really love. And this does it. It's a creative side of me, because originally when I was going through school, I wanted to be an art teacher, and a athletic coach, football coach, kind of a weird mix there. So I do have that creative side and that technical side and stuff. And the writing, I just brings out all that creativity and stuff. And I just love it. I just love telling stories and sharing stories. And I don't think I'm going to stop doing this now until I can't do it anymore, until I'm not here anymore to do it. So
Kevin D. Miller is our guest today. If you happen to be scrolling through online or watching the video on YouTube, maybe you're listening to the podcast and you have a question, you can always shoot it in to the chat room, and we would love to talk to you if you have any questions about the art and science of writing, about Kevin's brand new book, Eyes of Morpheus, or his previous books. And you mentioned it briefly, Heart of Steel, your debut book. That was a historical novel. And you said your dad encouraged you to write it. So we can't let that go. That's an awful good tease. Tell folks who are not familiar with Heart of Steel what it's all about, because it's a fascinating family story.
Yeah. What Heart of Steel is about is basically family. It's about waking up one morning and finding out your last name really isn't your real name, something that my father had no idea. My grandfather changed our name back in 1920, and we didn't know why. My last name really is Puhalski. It's a Polish name. He changed it to Miller, a very common name in America. And so it just sent me on a search, sent my family on a search. We found all these old newspaper articles. We learned that there was a tragic family tragedy back in the 1920s. My great grandfather was murdered in his sleep. My great grandmother was bound to a chair. My grandfather at the time was about 13. He was sent to the sheriff. Sheriff comes back. They investigate the murder, but everything isn't as it seems. So things start to unravel with the story, and it has a pretty shocking twist to it. And my grandfather ends up being sent on a journey. Him and his siblings are in an orphanage, and he decides to run away and try to earn money to come back and take care of them. But the story, we had so much stuff. My father had all this information, and he talked a lot to his cousin, and he just didn't know how to do it. He just said, son, would you take all this stuff and sit down and write your grandfather's story? And I said, yeah, me, I love a challenge. It's like, absolutely, I'd love to learn to write it. Why not write a book? Check that off my bucket list. So I took it on. I did the research. It took me about 3 years to do all the research, to really find out about my family, the whys and the whos and the whats, and then just to learn how to write, the writing process. I had to learn how to write as well, so that, Heart of Steel is my first book. And it took me some time to learn how to write the story and get it out there. But
what an amazing story, though, Kevin. And that's when you and I first met, was around that book and the story of your family. And you literally wake up one day and you find out, I'm not really Kevin D. Miller.
Right.
My whole last name has been fabricated. My
Right.
grandfather has hidden this huge secret from the family,
Yes.
and nobody knew, right? Not your
No,
siblings,
nobody knew.
not nobody.
My dad, I think my dad was a little PO'd, because he was like, he was stunned. He didn't know what to say. He's like, my dad never told me this. We never knew this. My grandfather, they swore an oath with his siblings. They took it to their grave and it stayed there for nearly a century,
And it was
So
a whole lot of sort of forensic work that you did, where you went back into small town newspapers. It was back in a small town in Ohio that this all
yes,
happened,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I was right outside Warren, Ohio. Little township called Southington is a little farm town. It was a very rich farm town. My great grandfather was a very rich farmer. He had a lot of money. He was a good old boy, and he was also a drunk, too. And so there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens there. And yeah, we had to go through and research, newspapers. I went to the city of Warren, or the town of Warren, went to their library, and pulled out even more newspapers to learn more things. We found legal documents, court documents, all kinds of stuff to put the story together, because I wanted to tell the story as accurate as possible, but I didn't want to tell it like a documentary. I wanted to write a novel. I wanted to be and read like a novel, and read cinematic like a novel, so that you're experiencing this story through the eyes of my grandfather, through the eyes of a 13-year-old boy who, to me, it's an incredible feat, for him to. I can't imagine being in his position. I had to imagine being in his position, but it just brought tears to my eyes. There was times I had to just kind of step away, because got so emotional for me writing the story. And I think that emotion carries through the story, and people pick that up. So I'm happy, that it does translate.
Yeah, and you use the word cinematic, and I happen to know that the book has been optioned to be made into a movie. It's that kind of story. So as an author, that has to be some pretty incredible validation. First time
Um,
author.
yeah, it left me speechless. I mean, again, it's so humbling. It's so exciting, but at the same time, it's so humbling. Yeah, the book was optioned. I gave it to a buddy of ours, and he has a production company, and he finally read the book. He was on set, and he finally had the time to read the book. And when he got back, he goes, "Let's do lunch." He goes, "Buddy, I want to option this book." He goes, let's get this story on screen." So we've been working on that, getting it to film, getting it to TV.
And
And
if there are people that are listening or watching right now, I mean,
sure.
it's a hell of a testimony that anything is really possible.
Yeah.
This is not even a third act for you; it's a fourth act for you from a career standpoint, to become an author, and then meet this actor who's a producer, and it's going
Mhm.
to be made into a movie. Folks, maybe listening or watching, say, I'd love to write my first book. I have no idea even how to begin that process, because it is daunting. If it were easy, everybody would do it, right?
Right.
Um, uh,
Yeah.
but having said that, you did it. So, what's the first thing someone who says, "I got a book in me," you think, well, what's the first thing they ought to do? Is there a step or a top three steps? Where would you tell someone to begin that wants to be an author to do what you've done?
Oh my gosh, man. Yeah, I would highly encourage it. It's something that I think every person, I mean, this might sound a little trite or cliche, but everybody's got a story in them. Everybody's got a story in their family. Everybody's got something that would be fascinating and interesting to share. But the first step is just overcoming your fear, overcoming your insecurity, overcoming that nagging voice that's saying, "Ah, you can't write this," But I would say the first step is just take a notebook. Take a notebook, sit down, and just plot that story out. Write the story out. Don't worry about how good or bad it is on your first draft if you're going to write this story. Just write it. Write the whole thing out, because that's what editing's for.
Right.
And just get over that hurdle of thinking that you can't do it, or because I did it. My only writing experience is I was a technical writer in addition to being a web developer. That does not translate to being a book author.
Sure.
And I know if I can do it, anybody out there, any of you out there could do it too, if you sit down and just make up your mind and write a good story. Because to me, Here's the thing the second thing I would advise, people look at great authors like Homer Hickam, and they got this wonderful poetic prose, and they're so good at what they do. And that's important. That's important. But in my opinion, what's even more important is to be able to tell a good story. That's what's going to hook your reader is if you engage them in a story and you pull them in that world and they live that and experience that through your writing. Now you got something, and you've got editors to help you with that prose. Just write your story, write a good story, and people will respond to it.
Kevin D. Miller is our guest today on Zoom into Books and the Big Time Talker podcast. He's got a brand new book, his third, Eyes of Morpheus, already winning awards. And one of the things that people who told me that love your books, Kevin, is the characterizations. They fall in love with those characters. They care what happens to them. And especially, I think, in your second book, which is also based on family history of yours. It's historical fiction. So before we talk about the new one, let's talk about book number 2 in the Kevin Miller series.
Absolutely. Yeah. Once I had finished Heart of Steel, and I fell in love with writing, and I'm like, okay, I got to have more. And my next story is inspired by my great grandparents. My great grandmother was Native American. She was what they referred to in those days, the white man referred to the natives as Mingo, which means she was Ohio Seneca. Usually the Mingo were part Seneca, part Cayuga, and these are members of the Haudenosaunee, which more commonly known the Iroquois.
Okay.
So she was Native. He was a son of Irish immigrants, and he was a Union soldier in the Civil War. And I'm thinking, okay, my wife is Hispanic. She's got Native in her. I'm a Irish Polish guy. I can relate to this. They had a mixed marriage, but they had a mixed marriage in a time, the Civil War, when it was illegal for a Native.
Yeah, 150 years ago. It's a big deal.
Yeah, illegal for a Native woman to marry a white man, So I'm just sitting there thinking, what would they have gone through? So anyway, I did a lot of research. I researched, his platoon, everything about him, every battle he fought in, because I wanted to integrate every single historical fact I could find on them. Couldn't find nearly as many as Heart of Steel, because it was a earlier time and I didn't have relatives to interview, but I pieced that story together. So I took the facts and inspired by them, and I wrote a historical fiction book based on that. And I get a lot of the feedback, like you just mentioned, of the characters, fall in love with the character. And I think that's so important, for writers to be able to do. Is like, if people don't love your characters, then they're not going to stick with your story. You
Right.
got to get them from the beginning. It's so important that, they can relate to the characters are relatable, and they can just, fall in love with them and want to know, all more about them and follow their journey.
The name of that book, Kevin, is
White Skies, Black Mingo. And it's available to Headline Books, just like the new one, and Amazon, and on my website, authorkevinmiller.com. I have the links to Headline Books and Amazon there as well. But
that's when the awards started rolling in. That's when people said, this guy, he's got it going on.
Yeah, well, I was starting to think that. I think maybe I do got it going on, because the awards start piling up and coming in. And I knew I had something. When I had my wife, Annette. She's my critique partner. I run stuff past her. I let her read stuff, because she won't hold back. I mean, she's going to tell me. She's not going to sugarcoat anything, and she'll let me know if that's something isn't working for her. But that's her favorite book. The first one, she gave me a lot of feedback on. The second one, she spent most of her time reading the book and asking for more chapters. When's the next chapter is going to come? Because she goes, this is my kind of story. This is my kind of book here. These characters, and just the story in general, and that's still her favorite story of all my stories, and falls right in line with the kind of books that she likes. So I knew I had something once I had her hooked.
How long did the first book, Heart of Steel, take versus the second book, White Skies Black Mingo?
That's an interesting question. The first book took about 3 years to write. The second book, during the COVID lockdown, took me about 3 months to write.
Wow. So it just poured out of you.
It poured out. It's one of those process is that it was the strangest thing, because the story seemed to just start writing itself. It's like I'm just kind of a passenger along here, and I'm living this story, and it just kind of starts writing itself, and things just start falling into place. I'm more of a pantser, that they call, instead of an outliner. I don't outline it. I just go and I see where the story takes me, and a lot of times I don't know where it's going. I don't know how it's going to end, but I'll put myself into a situation and put the characters into a situation, and then try to figure out how to get them out of it. And okay, now where does it go? How do they get out of this? I have no idea, but then it'll come to me.
Yeah.
Because my own process is a little strange, because a lot of stuff comes to me in my sleep. Before I go to sleep at night, I run the story through my head, and so many things come to me. And it's funny, because the new book, Eyes of Morpheus, that whole story came to me like in a dream, and in a half sleep. And I kind of woke up thinking, that's a great story. And I just kept trying to stay asleep and thinking about it. I had to wake up and write it down, and write the concept, the premise down, and wrote it from that. So that gives me a lot of creativity. And I know there's a lot of historical figures that have mentioned that they get a lot of their ideas in their sleep. I think.
Do you keep a notepad there? How do you make sure you don't forget things?
I do. I've got a journal. I've got several journals, and I wake up and I just start taking notes, and just make some bullet points so that I don't forget, this idea of that. Or I'll be, driving around or something. I'm thinking, oh man, I got to write that down, because I don't want to forget that. That's how this scene should go. Because I might be stuck on a scene, and the way your subconscious works, it keeps working in the back there, grinding, and all of a sudden, boom, something pops in, and it's like, okay, that's how this scene's got to go, and you just write it down and go from there. But it's an interesting
3 months,
process.
it's out and done, and people love that book.
Yes.
And then at that point, Kevin, you're like, and I'm going to put you in some pretty high cotton here. You're like John Grisham, who's known for legal books, or James Patterson, who writes these incredible crime thrillers. Robin Cook, who writes these medical thrillers. You're right there, and then you throw the publisher a total curveball. Even though you get these two very successful historical novels, you say, I want to do something completely different. It's like Monty Python, and now for something completely different. What are you thinking there?
Yeah.
What's the thought process behind taking this complete 180 detour?
I think just being myself, and being a little rebellious, being a little adventurous. Like I said, I'm not afraid to try new things, and I'm thinking, this is great. I love historical fiction, and I'll go back. I'll have more historical fiction in the future, but I'm like, I want to try something different. And I took some time, I spent some time, I took some of those masterclasses.com, and I highly recommend that for people out there, wanting to learn all kinds of different things. But I listened to all the authors that were on there, and a couple of them, kind of said that. So don't feel that you're tied to your genre.
Right.
Don't feel that you have to do that. If you want to write something different, write it. And I'm like, that's all I needed to hear. Because I've got these ideas, and this one came to me, and this Eyes of Morpheus is more of a science fiction, more speculative fiction. Speculative fiction being that we know these technologies exist, we can do them, we just don't have them yet. So that's kind of what defines speculative fiction. But I'm not going to hold back. If I've got a story in me, and if I feel it's a good story, I don't care what the genre is. I want to tell that story. I love telling stories, and I want people to enjoy these stories. And just I might write something completely different the next time, and throw Kathy another curveball.
And even the John Grishams of the world, he's a big sports guy. He's written a basketball book. He's written a baseball book. So
yes.
It does make sense to stretch out a little bit.
Sure.
And some people would call Eyes of Morpheus even visionary fiction. It's here's what could happen.
True.
It ignites the synapses there of what might happen based on, and this platform that's already there for folks that are interested in those kinds of books. Give us a snapshot. What is Eyes of Morpheus about?
Eyes of Morpheus. The premise here that came to me is the protagonist is a 30-ish neurosurgeon scientist. Now, I wanted to explore the science of cryogenics, where you freeze a body's frozen for the purpose of reviving it in the future, to where whatever ailment or illness they're suffering can be cured in the future. So the premise is this young scientist comes up with a method, with a process that actually works, and you don't have to freeze somebody, and because the procedure as it is today, they freeze you, but it destroys your cells. The dehydration, the process and stuff just crystallizes the brain cells. It doesn't work. I mean, anybody, that's been frozen, like Ted Williams, probably not coming back anytime soon. But her process is more of a of a fluid that they put in the body. So the body, it doesn't die. It's just put in a very cold, semi-frozen state, to where they can just stay there until such a time that this cure is formulated.
Science catches up.
Science catches up. So the inciting incident for this scientist is this. Now her marriage starts to fall apart. Her wants, her loves is just have a family, have kids, and she, her marriage crushes, just kind of crumbles. And then she finds out that she's facing terminal brain cancer. So now the inciting incident is a crossroads. It's like, do I stay here in this time and try to fight this cancer, or do I enter myself into the very program I created? And she chooses the latter, because she's distraught, and she's just at a point where she just doesn't want to be here anymore, doesn't have nothing to go home to. So she wakes up 87 years into the future, and she'll discover the consequences of her decision and her work, and the consequences of playing God, and and really questioning her own reality. So that's where the story goes. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to play around with there 87 years into the future.
Sure.
And that's kind of where the story goes from there. So,
one of the things that I've always found interesting about the way you write, especially after talking to a lot of your readers, your previous book and now this one, you have a female protagonist. Mm-hmm. You write a strong female character, and yet the women that I've talked to that read your books love the way you write those characters. And I'm not sure that you can articulate, but I'm going to ask, well, how do you do that? How do you put yourself inside the mind of somebody of a totally different gender?
That's a great question. And that's probably one of the greatest compliments, to me as a writer that I've received. Our good friend Dreama Denver, that was one of the first things she said. She says, she said, Kevin, if I didn't know that White Skies Black Mingo was written by a man, I would assume and just be sure that it was written by a woman. She goes, I don't know how you did that. I don't know how you told the story from the perspective of a woman so well. And the only way I can answer, the only way I can come up with an answer to that is that I'm surrounded by so many women, and I pay attention to them, I think. I mean, I have daughters. Okay, I have daughters, and I see them from the time they're little to their teenagers, to their young adults, and and of course, my wife and stuff. So I'm surrounded by a lot of women, and I really pay attention to how they think and how they feel, and see things. I think I've always had the ability to kind of be a little perceptive with people and kind of see things and feel things through their eyes, so I think that translates. And plus I have a great critique partner who happens to be a woman, my wife, who, if something isn't quite right, she'll point it out and say, what, a woman would probably think this or say this, or, lean towards this. But she gives me credit too. She says too, she goes, no, you do have an insight. And I think it's because I have so many daughters and so many girls that I'm around, that I just kind of pick up on things and pick up how they think, and the things they like and the things they hate, the things that irritate them, the things that they love, the way they look at guys, and the way, all those things, I just kind of make mental notes, and I'm able to translate it somehow, and that's about the best answer that I can give you on that.
I mean, it's a great gift, because a 30-year-old woman who is a neuroscientist, you are not, sir.
No, I am not. I am not. But you know what? Women have, just like men, have certain things in common. They have certain things in common, certain desires, certain loves, certain hates, certain emotions. And that's common to everyone, no matter what you do in life, so I kind of just take that, because again, I want, my reader to relate to the character and feel life through their mind and their emotions and their eyes, and if I can do that, it doesn't matter what he or she does, I've got the reader, and the reader's going on a journey with me.
Hey, if you just happen to be scrolling through on social media and you've landed here, this is the Big Time Talker podcast and Zoom into Books in conjunction with Headline Books. Kevin D. Miller is our guest. His brand new book is Eyes of Morpheus. It's a visionary fiction novel, available now at Amazon.com, HeadlineBooks.com, wherever books are sold. There it is. People are digging it. He's just won as a finalist the International Book Awards. You see a couple of other medals hanging up behind you. This is a whole different kind of way to write, though, from your first two historical fiction novels. You talked about doing all this research. You went to that little town in Ohio. You poured through courthouse records. Sure. You looked at old newspaper clippings, found out as much as you could in the second novel about these folks from the Civil War era. And this one, it's all up here. It's all in the imagination. Or is it? Was there any kind of research that you did for this book?
Yes, Burke. I mean, there's always research that goes into a book, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff here that it's my own imagination and creativity, obviously, but I spent a lot of time researching, cryonics, cryogenics, how the process works, and just started pondering how could somebody change that and fix that to make that work. I studied a lot, I went on a lot of sites, and studied neurons and brains and how our brains operate and work to try to educate myself. And I'm a person who loves to learn new things. I think, to prepare myself for writing a book, I want to just educate myself on every possible thing I could. I looked up, how there's technology today that they're getting to where people can sit and communicate successfully. This is a real study, from neuron to neuron through a computer. Now, hopefully someday they'll be able to do that without the computer in the middle there, but they've been successfully where the person just sits and thinks a thought and the other person picks up the thought. So these technologies are there and they're evolving, and it's possible. And you look at Elon Musk and his brain implant, and what could that possibly do, make people smart. There's a whole nother concept for a book, is what kind of terrifying future might that hold, for people to be able to, their intelligence go from, 150 IQ to 500, or something. I mean, but there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of technology out there. And I did spend a lot of time reading and researching, looking, watching YouTube videos. I love YouTube. YouTube's great. It's great. It's like, because a new book I'm working on, they have to fly in a hot air balloon, and I'm like, okay, I've never taken a hot air balloon trip. I'd like to, so I can experience that. But YouTube's there. I can just go and see how that's all done, how they inflate it, be in the balloon with somebody filming it, and kind of, and at least it's this next best thing to be in there to experience that, or to go. I haven't been to this beach, but I'll go and find a YouTube video on it and try to experience it that way if I can afford to travel, But
we're old enough to remember in a day when this access to information just wasn't there,
Right. Right.
I remember the door-to-door encyclopedia salesman.
Yes.
We talked my parents in it. They knew that I was a very curious sixth grader, and they saw that and talked mom and dad into spending all that money on encyclopedias. But now it really is all there. Do you think that access to information has made it easier for you as an author to be able to make these things happen?
Absolutely, most definitely. And being a web developer, professional web developer, I've got a good understanding of what sites to avoid and what sites are reliable sites, to go to get reliable information. I stay away from the Wikipedias where people are, contributing. They may or may not be right. But yeah, no, it's a wealth of information out there and a great resource for authors. Another point for new authors is like, do your research online. I mean, go to the library. I like to go to the library too and check things out there, but this is such a good resource to just pull up an article or a video or a documentary and just learn.
Let me ask you on this new book, it's Eyes of Morpheus, Kevin D. Miller is our guest. Would you, if given the opportunity, would you do this and put yourself to sleep so that you can wake up 87 years in the future if the option was given?
Yeah, well, I that's a good question, and that might be a spoiler alert, but because that's kind of the question that the book asks is, what are the consequences of that? I mean, that's what you got to ponder. What are the consequences of that? Because it all sounds really good. I mean, I've got a cancer, why not go to sleep? I'm probably not going to survive. Why not just take a chance and wake up, a century in the future and find a cure and be cured? But guess what? There's consequences to that. I mean, think about that. If I'm 100 years older, my children, my grandchildren, they're gone, what do? You're kind of alone. You're kind of alone out there. So it presents a lot of problems and a lot of issues. And for Dr. Grace, there's that and a lot more that kind of opens her eyes to see, is this the right thing? Is this the right decision? So that's a good question, and I'm not going to really answer for you because I want the readers to get the book, and I'll answer it in the book for you.
As to whether you, Kevin Miller, would do it or not.
Yeah, if Kevin Miller would do it or not.
That's the question.
Well, if that's the question, if you're pinning me in a corner and stuff, I would say probably not, because I'm going to salvage whatever years I have to spend with my wife and my daughters and children and grandchildren that I adore. And I'm not going to give up even one day of that to be in a future all by myself. And God knows what the future holds.
That's the right answer, whether your wife is off to the side watching this interview or not.
Oh, she is. And she just giggled right now. Yeah, no, she is. She's definitely. And that's why I'm making sure I'm giving right answers.
Well played, sir. Well played.
Again, it's go back to kind of understanding the feminine mind, and knowing the right things to say. I've learned over the years what to say and what not to say, even though sometimes I trip up, but I get pulled back in. To the boundary of what's right and what's not right.
So we've talked in this conversation about how women really love your books. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure if we left it at that's the right thing, because the concept for Eyes of Morpheus, I think, guys will love that book. Certainly Heart of Steel is a very strong, male character, your grandfather there. When you write, do you have a target in mind? This is my target reader. This is who I want to read the book, or no? Do you just put it out there and let the audience find the book?
A little bit of both, I think, Burke. I mean, there's always a target audience for a book. I mean, like White Skies, Black Mingo. People who love historical fiction are going to love this book, and not just women, because I've had women read this book who loved it, who gave it to their husband and say, you have to read this book because it doesn't just address women. I mean, it's for guys too. Guys will relate to it too. I mean, guys are going to relate to my grandfather, my great grandfather, and there's masculine parts in there as long as the feminine parts, and they mesh really well. And there's just a really good story to be told, and I wanted to tell, my goal with White Skies, Black Mingo was two things. I wanted to tell an honest, true story that honors women and tells a true story of a strong female protagonist, how a real world. I also wanted to be true to the Native Americans, and I wanted to tell a story that honors the Native Americans and is truthful and historically truthful, which is why it was really important to me to get that book in the hands of some Native Americans,
right,
to read that and give me the feedback. The first being was our friend Dodie Rogers, the daughter of Roy Rogers. She is Native American, and she was, I think, a bit skeptical when she first got my book, because she told me, she said, I wasn't sure how you were going to portray her, But after she read the book, she goes, she goes, I'm a fan. I'm going to buy your next book. You know, I loved what you did there. And she was which pleased me. It's like, okay, you know, I accomplished both goals. I was able to tell a good story that women will relate to. That's not an unrealistic character. You know, she has her flaws and her struggles, but it's her heart and her strength and her love that pushes her through and helps her, you know, do impossible feats. But at the same time, you know, that feedback told me that I honored my great grandmother and honored, you know, my ancestors in the writing of this book.
Author Kevin D. Miller is our guest today. The book is Eyes of Morpheus. That's the brand new book just released, available at headlinebooks.com. You can see all the links there in the Facebook comments for all of Kevin's books. This new one, you know, I think of it as a beach read. It's summertime. You want a book that's going to take you away, and you know, that you can really immerse yourself in. Maybe not something, as you know, Kevin, I'm based in Washington, D.C., where there are these very sort of heavy professorial books that really have to think a lot about. Eyes of Morpheus, I think, is the kind of book that you really can get lost in as a beach read. Some authors feel like, you know, a beach read, that's sort of, you know, that's maybe a backhanded compliment. I wonder how you feel about someone saying, hey, I want to throw that in the beach bag and take it with me and sit out in the lawn chair and soak up some rays and read this book. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
If you're reading my book, that's always a good thing. I don't care if you throw it in a beach bag. I don't care if you throw it in a brown paper bag. If you're going to read my book, that's a good thing, because I got you. Because I feel like if I can just get you to get through, you know, just read that first line, read that first chapter, I'm going to hook you. And that's always a good thing to read. I don't take that as a backhanded compliment or at all, because, you know, I just want to get that story out and share it with as many people as I can, and for as many people to read it as possibly can. I mean, it's got some great twists. It's got a lot of unexpected twists and turns that's going to catch the reader completely off guard, which, you know, is what you try to do, because readers love to be challenged. They love to try to figure out where the story's going. They love to solve mysteries and puzzles. And I gave them some good ones in this, you know, to figure out. So put it on your bag, go to the beach and read it and let me know.
You know, we talk about the feedback that you've gotten in terms of these awards for your books. Is it hard for you in today's world? You have to do them to read reviews of your book. Is there trepidation there? I've always wondered, as an author, I mean, you're setting yourself up with reviews, whether they're from readers or professional reviewers, may love it, may hate it. So you kind of have to gird yourself for battle every time you look at those, or are you able to internalize and take some constructive criticism when it comes?
You have to. I mean, I think in any creative field, whether it's writing or acting or singing or dance, anything, you have to have a thick skin. You have to be able to take the criticism along with the compliments. You know, fortunately for me, Heart of Steel has 94 reviews on Amazon. It's averaging a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So 90% of them are good. But there's always somebody. Not everyone's going to like your book, and that's another thing for new authors. Don't think that everyone's going to love your book, because it might not be their cup of tea. They might not relate to it. They might come from a different background. It's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So you just have to take the good with the bad. And I don't, you know, I love seeing good reviews, and I read all my negative reviews to try to make it a learning process to see, okay, why is this person writing this? And what can I change or do to make better? You know, if I'm agree with what they're saying, or if I'm accepting what they're saying, you know, how can I make myself a better author from that kind of feedback? It's feedback, you know, and negative feedback can be as productive as positive feedback. So that's what I use. I don't put a whole lot of weight on reviews, although I will say that reviews are extremely important. So if you're a reader of mine, please put reviews up there, because that in any book you read for any author, that's the way you thank an author, is you write a review, an honest review. You know, you don't have to go up there and feel obligated to give them a good review, and please don't go and just destroy somebody, you know, 1-star review or something. I said to me, I would never write anything less than a 3-star review for somebody, and I'll give them constructive, feedback and stuff, because I don't want to discourage and just tear somebody down, who's putting themselves out there and risking writing and stuff. That's just me. That's kind of a tough thing, to see, if that happens. But
sounds like your reviews are pretty good so far, and the brand new book, you're off to the races on it. One last question: when you do get, accolades like this International Book Award finalist, it's a pretty big damn deal.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel? I mean, does your head get so big you can barely get through the room? Is it an out of body experience, or is it just it's just another Saturday for Kevin Miller?
No, it's always a thrill. It's always Christmas. It's always, high fives and fist pumps and stuff. I'm a little kid at heart, I mean, I'll never change that. My daughters, my wife, they know that, I get excited, by stuff like that. And I show it. I can't hide it. And when I see that, I'm like, all giggly and all, I got to show everybody. I got to put this out there and show all my friends and stuff. Look at this, so they might get tired of me, saying, hey, look at this. I got this, but it's exciting. And I want to share it with people. I don't mean it in a way that might sound like my head's getting big, because my head definitely doesn't get big, but I get excited, and I want to share that excitement and say, hey, I think this is a good book because it's winning awards, give it a chance. Just to get somebody to read your book's a tough thing to do, a tough sell, but those awards help a great deal to give it merit and validation that, hey, this is a good book. You're missing out if you don't read this story. And I see a lot of sometimes in reviews of strangers, people I don't know, that say, I love this book. I can't wait for the next one. So okay, I got somebody. So now the bar set high, so I have to deliver. I worry about that. It's like, I don't want to drop the bar and put a book out that's not as good as the previous ones. It has to be at least as good or better than the previous ones, or I'm not going to put it out there. So
it looks like you're moving in the right direction. And if readers do want to reach out to you, one of the things that the internet has made much easier is that authors at all levels are generally a mouse click away. So tell readers how to get in touch with you. If they want to talk to you about your book, the craft of writing, or whatever, you are a pretty accessible guy.
I'm very accessible. My website, again, is authorkevinmiller.com. I've got links to all my social media up there. I've got links to my email. I may even have my phone number up there, but I don't want to get a whole lot of calls. Just you can call me or text me. I do get emails from people, interesting, even like with Hard to Steal, people who live in that area of Ohio that just contact and have more questions. Well, what happened to Stanley? And I love that. And I welcome that. It's like, if you read my book and you have questions, or if you have comments, or if you just want to, yell at me because I, killed a character or something. Absolutely. I get a thrill with that. And knowing and meeting, readers out there, because that, to me, I mean, I appreciate every person who takes the time to read my book and read the story, and takes the time to maybe do a review, takes the time to contact me. That's awesome. That's the reward here, for writing, for being a book author. So yes. Mm-hmm.
Find author Kevin Miller at authorkevinmiller.com. There are links to all his books, including the brand new one, Eyes of Morpheus, visionary fiction. What would you do if you could put yourself to sleep and wake up 87 years in the future? Find out in Eyes of Morpheus from Kevin Miller. Thank you to our hosts, Headline Books, our show sponsor, speakermatch.com. Kevin Miller, always great to see you, sir.
Oh, always a pleasure, Burke. Always a pleasure. Yep.
Thank you for watching online, Zoom Into Books. Thank you for listening to our Big Time Talker podcast. Wherever you go, whatever you do today, make it a great day. Thanks for being here. Bye, everybody.